Hello and welcome to Buffy and the Art of Story. If you love the Buffyverse and you love creating stories or just taking them apart to see how they work, you're at the right podcast. Today I'm talking about Angel Season 1, Episode 7, Bachelor Party, where Doyle's estranged wife asks him for a divorce so she can remarry. Her fiancé seems nice enough, but Angel discovers he's hiding a major secret. If you are looking for episodes about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you can find every episode from Welcome to the Hellmouth and the Harvest to the season finale chosen by scrolling back in this podcast feed, or you can find them on YouTube or on my author website at lisalilly.com. And I am Lisa M. Lilly, author of supernatural thrillers, traditional detective mysteries, and the Writing as a Second Career books for fiction writers. Along with a recap of Bachelor Party, I'll explore its plot points and turns, its themes, the character development, and share my rating of the episode on a scale of 0 to 10. There are no spoilers for Angel, the series, but I do on occasion talk about all of Buffy, so proceed at your own risk if you haven't watched that whole series. Okay, let's dive into the Hellmouth, or maybe just Los Angeles. The Bachelor Party aired the first time November 16, 1999. It was written by Tracy Stern and directed by David Straighten. It begins with an interpersonal opening conflict. Angel reads in his darkened office by the light of a single desk lamp. Doyle comes in and wants him to go out to a sports bar, have a little bit of off-duty excitement, because Doyle can't just sit around while Cordelia enters wearing an evening gown and picks up his thought. He can't sit there while she steals into the night with the so much more wealthier than Doyle Prince. When Doyle points out that money won't make her happy, Cordelia says Pierce has so much more than money. He has a home in Montecito, a Mercedes, a place in the hills with a pool. When Pierce comes in, she tries to rush him out the door, but Angel questions what Pierce does for a living and where they're going and when they'll be back. Pierce is a traitor. After he and Cordelia leave, Doyle glumly says Cordelia's not going to fall for Doyle's unpretentious charms, is she? Angel responds, "Not unless unpretentious means you don't like to brag about your family's old money." Doyle thinks his demon half might be an issue too. As they're talking, a photo of Buffy falls out of Angel's book. Doyle guesses it's an old girlfriend and asks how she feels about a guy with an Irish accent, which is pretty funny given the flashbacks we have seen of Angel when he was Liam. But Angel's expression tells Doyle that this is Buffy. Before Doyle can say anything about it, though, he grabs his head in pain. He has a vision of vampires attacking a young guy downtown, and Doyle says everyone's got dinner plans but us. That's the second opening conflict, the vision of the vampires, and in some episodes, it would be the story spark, but it turns out that the vampires in the vision are not the main plot. All the same, we go to credits. On return, Pierce drones on about soybeans and trading, and then has a little bit of self-awareness and apologizes for boring Cordelia. Cordelia says she doesn't mind, a very polite way of saying yes, he is boring her, and he goes on about how he made 6 1/8 cents on a trade. Can she imagine anything more exciting? The scene cuts to Angel and Doyle fighting those vampires. Doyle's demon spikes come out on his face, but he shakes them off and keeps fighting looking like a human. After it's over, Angel asks why he did that since he's stronger as a demon, but Doyle doesn't like himself that way. Unseen, a large vampire lurks behind them as they split up. Angel will take the guy they saved home, and Doyle heads to the office. It's nighttime. Cordelia and Pierce pull up in front of Angel Investigations in Pierce's convertible. He's sorry she's not feeling well. She says she is too. She really wanted to hear the end of the pigs and beans story. He insists on walking her to her car because he's not sure about this neighborhood. That big vampire leaps out and tells Pierce he's right. It's crappy. Pierce sees the vampire in vamp face and runs to his car and drives off as the vampire grabs Cordelia. The vamp wraps its arm around Cordelia's neck and she bites the arm, causing him to loosen his grip a little. Doyle emerges with a crossbow but has trouble shooting because Cordelia's in the way. But finally he manages to shoot the vampire in the foot. Cordelia gets free. Doyle fights the vampire and finally kills it by finding that crossbolt from his crossbow on the ground and staking it. Cordelia runs over to help Doyle and says, "You were so brave." Doyle responds, "You think you could say that again without so much shock in your voice? You're stepping on my moment of manliness here." Cordelia says, "I'm sorry, I'm just, And Doyle says, "Surprised?" Cordelia clarifies, "Grateful." The next day, Cordelia tells Angel all about her dull date. Pierce could keep her in blue boxes, but the whole night, all she can think was if he saw a monster, he'd probably throw a shoe and run like a weasel, which it turns out gave him too much credit. After Cordelia explains that blue boxes refers to Tiffany's blue boxes for their very high-end jewelry, Angel tells her it's only human to run in the face of that kind of danger. Cordelia agrees, but complains that now rich and handsome aren't enough for her. She wants brave and interesting, and it's all Angel's and Doyle's fault. There Doyle was swooping in like a badly dressed superhero. She was especially impressed that it was a tough fight, but the first thing Doyle asked when it was over was whether she was okay. That's substance. So she'll have to kill herself. She swore after Xander Harris she'd never date another fixer-upper. But maybe Doyle has hidden depth. She resolves to buy him a mocha for saving her. It's the least she can do. As I watched the episode, I still was not sure where the story spark or inciting incident that gets the main plot rolling was, because I was seeing the main plot as the Bachelor Party, for which the episode is named. I'll talk more about that after the recap is over, but just keep that in mind for now, because while watching, it felt to me like Cordelia's changing feelings for Doyle might be the main plot, in which case Doyle diving into that fight in some ways set that off. However, it turns out that is more of the subplot that wraps around the main plot. For now, Cordelia goes out to the outer office and catches Doyle reenacting the fight. He is a little embarrassed, but she's very kind about it, and she tells him he might not have zero potential. That isn't exactly a compliment, and she amends it to tell him she's trying to say she appreciates what he did and maybe. But a woman enters the office, calls Doyle Francis. He calls her Harry and asks where she's been. She names some not remotely touristy countries. After some prompting, Doyle tells a shocked Cordelia first that his full name is Alan Francis Doyle and that this is his wife. That's 11 minutes 22 seconds into the episode, so a little more than a quarter way through, and that's usually where we see the first major plot turn that should come outside the protagonist, spin the story in a new direction, and raise the stakes. If Doyle is the protagonist, and ultimately I think that he is, this is definitely a turn. Harry and Doyle argue a little over who ran out on whom. Angel joins them, and he plays along when Doyle pretends that he runs the agency and Cordelia and Angel work for him. Harry says she and Francis used to be madly in love, but here they are 4 years later, separated. She asks if she can talk to Doyle alone, but a tall man Richard comes in, he calls Harry Hunbun and says he just couldn't wait in the car any longer. He shakes Angel's hand and says he really is a handsome fellow. Then when Angel points him to Doyle, Richard says, "That's more like it." Then he apologizes. He's all thrown off because of the wedding. Harry is not happy that Richard is blurting things out. Angel drags Cordelia into the office, and Richard steps out too. When they're alone, Harry tells Doyle she didn't come there to hurt him, but she needs him to sign divorce papers. A bit disgruntled, understandably, Doyle says he'll have his people look over them. Harry agrees to return in a few days. In the next scene, Doyle tells Angel he was not even 20 when he and Harry got married. They fought a lot. She's the one who left, but she had a reason. He sneezed and sprouted demon face. He didn't tell her about his demon half before because he didn't know. He never met his father, and his mother didn't tell Doyle the father was a demon because she wasn't sure that it would affect Doyle. But it did when he turned 21. Doyle says it seems like Richard could give Harry a good life, but when Angel agrees that Richard seems friendly, Doyle leaps to his feet and says he knew there was something wrong. He goes on about having to look out for his soon-to-be ex, but he can't do it himself. That would look really bad. Angel agrees to check up on Richard, but warns him, "Don't tell Cordelia. She'll want to charge Doyle." We cut to Angel following Richard at night. Richard makes some sort of exchange with somebody in the dark outside a building. Then he goes to a restaurant. He enters through the back. Harry joins him, excited to show him packages she bought that day for the wedding. Richard disappears into the back room to get a bottle of wine. He turns into a demon face. It's not like Doyle's, it's a red face, a little bit like vampires, but no fangs, and he grabs a giant knife. Angel, alarmed, bursts through the window, shattering it, and fights Richard. He doesn't go into vamp face. Harry intervenes, and Angel points out that Richard's a demon, and Harry says, "Well, yeah." She explains that she's an ethnodemonologist. She became one after learning about Doyle. She admits she was spooked at first by Doyle's manifesting his demon half, but then she accepted it. She encouraged him to meet other demons, but Doyle just wouldn't. He couldn't accept himself. He shut down and became really difficult to live with. They split up. Harriet met Richard when she was researching animovic demons. His clan is fully assimilated, and they own a chain of restaurants. Richard tells Angel he buys some items for the restaurant that aren't exactly illegal, but are not quite above board, like quail eggs, and that was the exchange Angel saw. The knife was to cut the strings on Harry's packages. The next day, Doyle is shocked when Angel tells him Harry is good with becoming Mrs. Demon. Angel looks up the animovic demons in a book. They had violent leanings, but they gave up their old ways. Now they run restaurants with pretty expensive windows. Doyle's going to chip in for that. He adds that he thought Harry was pitying him when she claimed to be okay with his demon heritage, and he concludes, "Harry didn't leave because of the demon in me. She left because of me." This reminds me of Amends, where Angel tells Buffy something like, it's not the demon in him that needs killing, it's the man. So Angel can clearly empathize with what Doyle is going through. We're near the midpoint, or really past the midpoint of the episode. Typically here, if there's a strong plot, we see the protagonist suffer a major reversal, make a major commitment, or both. Doyle does make a commitment. In the next scene, he signs the divorce papers and gives them to Harry and Richard. She goes into Angel's office to copy them. While she does, she talks to Cordelia, telling her that Richard wants Doyle to come to his bachelor party. Richard's family really wants Doyle's blessing for the marriage. And then she asks Cordelia to come to her shower. The only people she knows in LA are Richard's family. When Richard asks Doyle to come to the party, Doyle agrees. The scene cuts to a suburban house. Inside, Richard's family passes around a bucket of chicken. and plans the bachelor party. Richard mentions that Doyle is sweet. He's sure they'll all enjoy him. One of his brothers reads off the events for the party, including a buffet, drinks, a stripper, ritual eating of the ex-husband's brains, charades. Another brother says, "What was that?" Charades. They argue about whether to go ahead and finally agree. That is a great hook about the peril to Doyle before we go to a commercial. On return, Doyle and Angel go into a restaurant that's closed for a private party. Richard is a little taken aback that Doyle brought Angel, but he introduces them around. The brothers and an uncle talk in a demon language when Angel walks by. At the bar, Richard and Doyle toast to Harry. Richard wants to know what Harry was like in the old days. He says, "Tell him everything." The scene cuts to Harry at her shower telling Cordelia it was a nightmare. At first, she liked how Doyle took charge, which shocks Cordelia. Not that Harry liked it, but that Doyle took charge of anything. Harry adds more and more things that surprise Cordelia, including that Doyle taught 3rd grade. He got his teaching certification before he met Harry. Richard's mom interrupts, calling them over for pornographic Pictionary, and Harry says to Cordelia, "Their ways are not our ways." At the party, loud music plays. Richard tells Doyle he feels like he's living in Doyle's shadow. Harry will always love Doyle, but she needs different things now. Richard can make her happy, but he needs Doyle to be part of it, to give his blessing, or there won't be any marriage. The dancing girl / stripper arrives, and Richard's friends drag him away. Later, Angel checks out the back rooms of the restaurant and the upstairs. He overhears the brothers and uncle chanting in that demon language. One of them cuts his hand and squeezes out blood for a ritual. In another room, Angel calls Cordelia and asks to talk to Harry, who tells him her Etruscan is a little rusty, given that it's a dead demon language. She is disturbed when Angel tells her they're speaking it tonight. Thank you for coming back after the break. My other life as a lawyer and legal writing professor got quite a bit busier than usual. I also needed some extra time for finishing the first draft of my next QC Davis crime novel, The Desperate Man. I'm aiming for a March release for that, but we will see. In the meantime, I'm excited to return to Shadow and Storm, the first supernatural thriller I've written in some time. I finished the first draft of that before I started The Desperate Man, and now I'm going back to revise it. It'll be great to look at it with fresh eyes and with the comments from my wonderful beta readers. Next step will be sending it along to my editor, and I'm super excited about that. So thank you so much for your patience, and as always, for listening to the Buffy and the Art of Story podcast. I love being able to share thoughts about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the Buffyverse, and Angel the series with you. He gives her the words, and she tells him she'll check the family library. When Angel hangs up, the brother and uncle attack him. There's a fight. Angel never goes into vamp face, and they throw him out a window. He lands on the ground and is knocked out, and they think he's dead. Inside, Doyle tells Richard he regrets not making Harry happy. This is his second chance, so he won't stand in Richard's way, and he gives his blessing. This is a little more than 3/4 through the episode and is the last major plot turn. Richard, excited, tells everyone, and then things happen really fast. Richard's friends and family swarm Doyle and push him into a giant wheeled box. Only his head sticks out. They lock the box and they all turn demon face. Richard thanks Doyle for his sacrifice. Someone else jabs a needle in the side of Doyle's head to numb it. They tell Doyle they're not barbarians. They don't want him to suffer when they cut into his scalp. And we cut to commercial, another great hook. We really raised the stakes for Doyle. Harry and Cordelia see something in the books about ingesting past love. Harry calls out, asking what is the tradition of having the ex-husband at the bachelor party about. One of the aunts blurts out, well, they're certainly not going to eat your ex-husband's brains. The mother clears her throat and looks disapproving. As Harry and Cordelia head for the door, the aunt finishes. For instance, at the restaurant, Doyle yells for Angel, but Richard tells him Angel started a fight and had to be thrown out. He claims Harry won't mind any of this. She accepts Richard's culture. Doyle thinks for a second he's getting a reprieve when one of the friends protests, but it turns out he's only upset because they are using a shrimp fork to eat the brains. Everyone agrees they're fuzzy on the etiquette. It's been centuries since anyone married a divorcee. Richard's deeply disappointed when Doyle tries to take back his blessing. Maybe he doesn't even want to eat Doyle's brains now, but the others persuade Richard not to be rude to Doyle, and anyway, you can't take back a blessing. Richard apologizes, adding he'll be honored to eat Doyle's brains. Outside the restaurant, Angel wakes up and vamps out. Inside, Richard apologizes to Doyle, adding that he'll be honored to eat his brains. He's about to slice into Doyle's head when Angel bursts through the door. This is a bit of a three-beat. We had Angel breaking through a window, then the reference to the cost of breaking that window, which Doyle might share, and this time he comes in through the door, but nonetheless breaks it down. One of the brothers is shocked and says to Doyle, "You brought a vampire to my brother's bachelor party?" We are in the climax, that final confrontation between the opposing forces. There is lots of fighting. Richard uses that ritual knife to attack Angel, who punches him. Doyle rolls around the room, being knocked about until he smacks into something and the lock on that box springs open. This time he does let his spikes out and joins the fight at full power. There's lots of brawling until Harry runs in and yells at everyone to stop. Richard tells Hunbun this is for guys only and apologizes about the stripper. Harry says, "Not the stripper, Richard. There was a stripper?" Richard tells her she really shouldn't be there, and Cordelia says he shouldn't be trying to eat her friend's brains. Doyle, still spiny, sits up as Cordelia calls them all horrible, ugly demon people. She sees Doyle and smacks him over and over with a metal tray. Angel intervenes, and looking human again, Doyle staggers once more to his feet. Cordelia sees him so beat up and says, "Look what they did to you." Harry demands to know if Richard planned to eat Doyle's brains and when he was going to tell her about it. Richard, sheepish, says he hoped she'd never need to know. Harry's upset. He was ready to start their marriage with deceit. Doyle thinks that kind of misses the point. Uncle John says the ancient teachings are very dear to them. But Harry says, please, when was the last time he stopped watching TV long enough to spill the blood of a she-goat? She calls their customs barbaric, and they call her a racist. Richard says he's sorry, but if he doesn't eat Doyle's brains, they can't get married. She clasps Richard's hands, facing him, then looks at Doyle and back at Richard. She lets go of the hands and leaves. All of that could be part of the falling action of the episode, where we resolve any subplots and tie up loose ends. Or you could see that as beginning now, depending what you view as the resolution of the main plot. Richard looks down. He's holding Harry's engagement ring. On the way out, Harry tells Doyle that if he says one word, she'll eat his brains. The brother comforts Richard, who wants a wife whose knees only bend the one way anyway. The scene cuts to Doyle sitting in the outer office of Angel Investigations, looking sad. Cordelia and Angel talk in Angel's office. Cordelia says someone needs to cheer him up, and she stops Angel and says someone with a heartbeat. Cordelia goes to Doyle and asks if he's going to be loser pining guy now because they already have one of those in the office. Both Doyle and Angel say, hey. Cordelia, referring to Angel, says he can get away with it. He's tall, and look at the way clothes hang on him, but you... And Angel says, okay, I think you've cheered us up enough. Cordelia offers Doyle some cliches like tomorrow is another day, but eventually she tells him nice guys don't always finish last. Doyle says, you think I'm a nice guy? Cordelia responds, I think it, I say it, it's my way. Doyle says he feels a little better, but only for a second because another vision hits. It's pretty blurry, but we see a fight with Buffy. When it's over, Angel asks what Doyle saw. Doyle hesitates, and we go to credits. That is the end of the episode. As you know, if you watched all of Buffy, this vision leads into the Buffy Thanksgiving episode, Pangs. You can find that in the podcast feed. I won't be re-releasing it because you really don't need it to understand the next episode of Angel. It pretty much stands on its own. All you need to know will be covered in the beginning of the next episode. Turning to the plot of Bachelor Party, like Sense and Sensitivity, here I had questions about what was the main plot, but once I finished outlining my thoughts on it, this worked much better for me because here, though the action is based on the Bachelor Party, which doesn't even get mentioned until a quarter way through the episode, that isn't really the main plot. The main plot is Doyle's struggle to accept his demon half. This plays out through the entire episode and is what really drives this story. It begins with his reluctance to fight as a demon, even though he's stronger. Angel comments on it, and that sets off Doyle's internal plot of trying to come to terms with it. That is emphasized when Harry appears, and there's a bit of a turn when Doyle accepts that he was the one of the two of them who couldn't face his demon half, and that was why Harry left. But as in reality, characters don't just realize something and fully embrace change. So Doyle's inner acceptance is put to the test. First, when he's asked to go to the bachelor party and then asked to give his blessing. Doyle doesn't know what he's agreeing to. And for him, it is a question of whether he can let go of the past and let Harry be happy with a demon. That is very challenging for him, and it requires truly accepting that his struggles were what more or less doomed his marriage. Doyle does start to truly accept his demon half by giving his blessing, and of course, his decision is undermined right away, or maybe not undermined, but causes him more problems right away because it turns out that Richard, unlike Doyle as a demon, does pose a threat to humans and specifically to Doyle. Doyle ultimately prevails in this story despite that he is locked in that box for part of the climax because first he brought Angel with him, so he made that smart decision. And now when he gets free, he fights as his demon self. He sprouts his spikes, embraces who he is, and he joins the brawl and does very well. And in the end, while it is Harry who makes that final decision not to marry Richard, Doyle makes a choice to trust Harry to make the right decision. He and Angel hang back. They could have run. They could have kept fighting. They were doing pretty well, but he trusts Harry. And that's why I see Doyle's inner struggle as the true plot, and the action of the bachelor party is just part of that and an outer manifestation of it. It works better than Sense and Sensitivity because there, Kate wasn't making as many choices because she was under the influence of that spell. And here, Doyle is making these incremental changes and growth throughout and making choices. There is as well the subplot of Cordelia getting to where she sees Doyle's strengths rather than only his weaknesses. There's a bit of a subplot in the episode itself about it where she starts not even considering it, going out with handsome Rich Pierce instead, becomes dissatisfied with that, and then starts to see Doyle. It also has been a running subplot for the series so far. Moving on to theme, that is a little tougher here. What is the episode saying? There are some questions raised about differing cultures and customs. Do the demons have to assimilate? Is Harry a racist because she calls their customs barbaric? But there's not any nuance here. As human beings, we are not going to see it as okay for another culture to murder people because their rituals or religion requires it. So I don't really see that as a major theme of the episode. It's more of a bit of an undercurrent and is used somewhat for humor. The main theme is probably self-acceptance and being true to yourself, and Doyle gets almost all the way there. The exception is Cordelia still doesn't know about his demon half, something that was mentioned early in the episode. But he has come a long way. Richard, too, has some issues with acceptance of himself. My take on him is that if he were really true to himself, if he really accepted himself, he either would be honest with Harry, even if it meant losing her, or he would look for someone who accepted his customs rather than hiding them. Because while he claims Harry will be fine with it, it's clear he knows she won't because he says he hoped he would never have to tell her. Harry likewise has to be true to herself too. She doesn't experience growth. It's more that something is revealed to her. While it takes her a bit to get to the key issue, as Doyle notes, she's focused first on whether Richard was going to start their life with deceit. She does call the customs barbaric, and it's clear to me at least that if Richard had told her in advance, she would not have been on board with it. So she is the character from beginning to end who is most self-aware of the three of them. As I noted, Doyle has some compelling growth. Here, it makes him a more and more interesting character, and that growth is wound into the plot. It is gradual and slow, yet it is dramatic because we have that outer conflict of the bachelor party and the eating of the brains. This is a great example of how to tell something of a quiet story about Doyle's internal struggles and make it very suspenseful and engaging and dramatic, because it is not about Doyle sitting around and talking about his feelings. We don't have to have an inner dialogue or narration by Doyle. It plays out through the events of the story, not just the bachelor party, but Harry appearing and needing those divorce papers signed. Cordelia, as always, is so much fun. She has the best lines, and she shows a lot of growth as well. She had such a bad experience with Xander. We don't hear all about it here, but there is the reference to Xander, which is probably partly because we have the Buffy visions, and this episode leads into a Buffy episode, so we are mentioning things about Sunnydale, but it really fits this situation. If you're writing a novel, or you hope to, you probably have questions, including ones like, will this idea sustain a full-length book? Am I ready to invest this much time? And is there enough conflict? Or you might be halfway through a novel already and feel unsure if the plot is working or where to take your story next. In-person writing workshops can help, but fitting them into your crowded schedule is a challenge. That's why I created How to Plot Your Novel from Idea to First Draft as an online self-study course you can take at your own pace. Watch and take the entire course or choose only the sections that will be most helpful for whatever stage you're at. If you're thinking about writing a novel, started one but are stuck along the way, or you want to revisit your plot before you revise, this could be exactly what you need. Find all the course sections on patreon.com/LisaMLilly/shop. You can buy the sections whether or not you are a Patreon member. Learn more about what's in each module on Patreon or at writingasasecondcareer.com/your-novel. Not ready for a course or it's just not for you? Check out the book, The One-Year Novelist, a week-by-week guide to writing your novel in 1 year under my clever nonfiction pen name, L.M. Lilly. The One-Year Novelist is available on all ebook platforms or in workbook or audiobook formats. You can find it and all my books on fiction writing at writingasasecondcareer.com. Doyle, like Xander, it sounds like had a difficult home life for different reasons. Like Xander, he is, in Cordelia's eyes, a fixer-upper. She doesn't like the way he dresses. He doesn't fit her idea of handsome. He is definitely not rich. Like Xander, he struggles with self-esteem and self-acceptance. Doyle even mentions that she's stepping on his moment of manliness, and we know throughout Buffy, Xander had some issues with what does being a man mean, with not feeling physically strong enough or effective enough, at least when he was younger. And the fact that Cordelia can set aside that the Xander relationship ended so badly for her with Xander cheating on her and hurt her so deeply, and consider getting involved with Doyle shows so much growth, as well as her willingness to set aside her desire for someone who is wealthy and who can help her get back to that life that she misses. Harry doesn't really have character growth. She has some conflict at the end with Richard, but she pretty much, as I mentioned, is who she is. Richard is a little more developed as a villain than little Tony from Sense and Sensitivity because he does seem to love Harry. All the same, he is not honest with her, and he's willing to eat Doyle's brains, which qualifies him as a villain. How does this episode build the world of Angel, and is it consistent with the Buffyverse? I'll start with where it is consistent. Cordelia's subplot fits her past with Xander, and Angel is clearly still deeply affected by his relationship with Buffy. So plenty of consistency with the Buffyverse. The world building for Angel, the series, though, is a little shaky because of Doyle's backstory. The timing does not fit. Harry says she and Doyle were madly in love, but 4 years later, here they are separated. And Doyle says they were not even 20 when they married. So that makes Doyle 19 at the oldest when they married. Yet Harry says when they met, Doyle already had his teaching certification. That requires a college degree. Now, I suppose Doyle could have been some sort of super brainy wonder student who finished college by age 18, but we really have not seen anything that suggests that. And to the contrary, Doyle does not seem any smarter or more educated than Cordelia or Angel. It's hard to square that. My guess is the writers needed to have this backstory. They wanted Cordelia to hear all these great things about Doyle. He taught third graders. He volunteered at the soup kitchen. But that had to be some time ago because those things are never referenced, and it's hard to explain Doyle falling that far in, let's say, a year. If all this happened a year ago, likewise, him never mentioning Harry would seem really strange if they only separated last year. It's not clear when they separated, just that it's been 4 years since they were madly in love. Even if Doyle didn't tell Cordelia about Harry, it seems like he would have had to tell Angel in the beginning when they're talking about Buffy. So they needed some sort of time frame. At the same time, my guess is they did not want Doyle to be too much older than Cordelia, since they are exploring this idea that they may get involved. And Cordelia, remember, is only 18. Maybe she turned 19 over the summer. I suppose that's possible, but she graduated high school very recently, and in the prom episode, there was the reference to her being 18. That is the only way I can make sense of Super Doyle, who got his teaching certificate by age 19 and worked as a third grade teacher while he was with Harry, who he married before he turned 20. And this is not something I only noticed because I am looking so closely for the podcast. I remember on first watching, that really threw me. It's also possible that the writers were thinking that teaching third grade was something like teaching preschool and you didn't need a college degree. Not sure about that. I would love to ask one of them. It doesn't spoil the episode, but it does distract from it because my brain was busy trying to sort that out instead of following the Harry and Doyle backstory. Which brings me to my rating of the episode. That background inconsistency plays a little bit into my rating, keeping it from being quite as high as I might have made it. At the same time, I really enjoy that this is Doyle's story and that his character arc almost sneaks in there. You could nearly miss it in all the intensity of the finding out Richard's a demon and the bachelor party and the eating of the brains, and yet it is there. And I think whether you sit down and think about, is that the main plot or is it about eating the brains? It has a really strong effect. So for that reason, I give The Bachelor Party a 9 out of 10, which I have to say surprised me a little because my recollection of it was that it was a fun episode that didn't affect the arc of the series that much. And yet, surprise, it does make a big difference for these characters. That is it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and a special thank you to the patrons who support the podcast and to everyone who has shared it on social media or rated it on your podcast app. Come back next time for Angel Season 1, Episode 8, I Will Remember You, a crossover episode where Buffy comes to LA to confront Angel, and their encounter with a demon causes major changes for both Angel and Buffy. You can find back episodes of Buffy and the Art of Story, as well as the Buffy and the Art of Story books and all my fiction at lisalily.com. To support the podcast, hear extra bonus content, and get each regular episode a few days early, join the Patreon community at patreon.com/LisaMLily. That's Lisa, M as in Marie, Lilly. Music for this episode was written and performed by Robert Newcastle. Buffy and the Art of Story is a production of Spiny Woman, LLC. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved.